problem, and so on. This is about interaction between capital and the state. All right, which brings us to the last topic, state and stabilization. And the myth that the market, in our time of neoliberalism, the market, that the state's in the way, and of course all the debates in your adult lifetime are dominated by this view of the state as somehow an interference, a regulatory burden, and unnecessary even in crisis times. And what I'm going to talk about now is about how absolutely essential the state is in crisis times. And all this, of course, adds up to, in the case of neoliberalism, very bad macroeconomics. So it's pretty amazing. So my topics, crisis management, the lessons of the New Deal, and collective amnesia I'll finish up on. Okay, so neoliberal nonsense, that markets always make the best choices. Yes, markets are quite brilliant in setting prices, giving you signal for behavior in very complex, far-flung economies. All right, and short of having kind of computing power for planning and doing it some other way that we haven't figured out, markets are still the way modern economies are all organized. There was planning. The USSR did reasonably well for a time with planning. China with planning. There's still planning done in healthcare and so on. In a lot of countries, it works just fine. But running very complex modern economies is difficult to do. And to try and run it through a central plan is not virtually impossible and probably extremely inefficient. So we use markets. Okay, but does that mean we should worship markets and we should invent fantasies about markets? No. Markets are imperfect. Markets have all kinds of problems of monopolies, for example, and unequal power. But they also have a fundamental problem to run amok and for everybody to get on one side of the boat until the boat topples over. Or some other metaphor that I'll have to come up with. So bandwagon effects are fundamental in markets, are fundamental to financial activities, to capitalist investment. Everybody gets hyper-excited about something. They fool themselves that the boom is going to go on forever, and it bursts. And I'll talk more about financial bubbles later on. I've already talked about cycles and booms and busts. So that's a normal part of capitalism, is the ups and downs, and sometimes extreme ups and downs like we just had. Ironically, for the last 20 years, the dominant theories in economics have forgotten about macroeconomics. There's a great recent article by Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winner and great critic of contemporary economic theory, who just says, he has this article labeled, "Is there progress in economics?" And he wonders how you could talk about progress in economic science when we've forgotten everything we knew about macroeconomics. And he's plugged in the kind of perfect market theory that you get with Say's law in 1800, that the economy can't be out of balance. And yet that's what dominated financial theory in our time. And Keynes is hardly talked about. And of course, I have to put in a little kind of knife in the ribs here. The neoliberalism is not only wrong when it says that markets are self-adjusting. It doesn't even believe its own line about no government. It wants no government for poor people. It wants no government. It would rather like have the private markets handle all that juicy money flowing through Social Security so they can make money off of it. But when it comes down to the crunch, they love their military. That's why Ron Paul isn't that popular amongst Republicans, right? Because he's against having a big military and conquering the world. And that doesn't play very well with the right, with most neoliberals. They love prisons and police forces. This country is so militarized and policed. The police have such immunity. They shoot people in BART stations. I mean, we live in a very strange police society today that wasn't there even when I was young in the middle of the Cold War. And so on. They love airports. Airports are all subsidized by the federal government. You didn't know. That's private enterprise. They hate trains. I don't know why. They hate trains and they love airplanes. And I can't quite figure that out, except trains that more obviously have to be subsidized. And of course they hate buses, because nobody rides a bus except poor people. But you'd think they might like Amtrak, because a lot of rich old people ride Amtrak. But maybe it's not enough. Or maybe they don't like old people. I don't know. And of course they love government when all hell breaks loose. So when there's a panic like we had in 2008, when the banking system literally froze up, when the greatest investment bank in the country, in the world, Lehman Brothers, went under suddenly, the whole investment system in Wall Street, the greatest financial center in the world, was collapsing. Guess who they called in? Wow, funny. And everybody agreed except for a few kind of extreme on the left and the right. He said, don't do it, don't do it. But the problem is you have to do it. You cannot not have a banking system if you're going to have capitalism. And the banking system was just falling apart. Nobody loaned anybody, even overnight. The whole overnight system, which is trillions of dollars, just froze up for a few days in late 2008. And my God, was there panic in the higher circles of capital and government. So, who saved them? The government. The U.S. government, the British government, the Irish government, and so on. Interestingly enough, although I'm going to talk about Keynes, there's no real theory of financial bailouts. A lot of it's sort of cobbled together, where you have to get money back into the banks. You got to restore confidence, of course, because a lot of it's panic thinking. But you got to get money into the banks so they can lend again. And so the banks that are shaky suddenly have money in their vaults, even if it's electronic money, okay? It's virtual money, but it's theirs. So the other banks will trust them. So if they make a loan to them, that they'll trust them. And so that they'll have money to lend to business and to consumers. So you've got to stop the panic, but you've got to recapitalize banks, and you've got to eliminate the bad banks. And so we get the FDIC and other banking, and the Fed and so on, stepping in. But mainly the FDIC to close down banks that are going belly up, like Countrywide Savings, and merging them, either closing them or merging them. Usually they merge them into bigger banks, which is why, as we come out of the crisis, we now have more bank concentration than we had before, because they put all these dying banks into the few healthy banks that were left, like Washington Mutual went to Chase. The bank bailout that gets all this talk of $750 billion was peanuts. The Federal Reserve, in the end, guaranteed through purchases of bank assets, loans to banks, or insurance companies, bailing out AIG and so on. The Federal Reserve, quite way beyond anything was ever chartered to do by Congress, just did it. Because the Federal Reserve is not run democratically. It's extremely secretive. It's appointed. The board is appointed by the president for long terms. But it's kind of government unto itself. And they were not going to let the banks fail. Now, whatever you think about the way they did it, and I have a lot of criticisms of that, they pumped, it just came out, the official figures, something like $12 trillion, which makes the bailouts just look like peanuts. That's what the Fed was potentially in hock for. But of course, most of it, because it did restore the bank system, most of that money's good. And probably there isn't that much of a taxpayer loss. But it could have been. But my point is here, not whether their taxpayers paid X or Y amount, but simply that the Fed had to do it. And if it hadn't been there and hadn't done it, the world would have collapsed. The world economy would have collapsed. And if you think this is bad, you don't want to see that. And what happened in the Great Depression was that the Fed did exactly the wrong thing. The Fed actually withdrew money from the system, and the banks did collapse. And that's why we ended up with a one-third drop in GDP. I'll come back to that. What did Keynes teach us? Keynes was an English economist who also, by the way, loved playing stock market. He was a brilliant financier. Did very well at it. Did totally pro-capitalist, by the way, in case you have any doubts. But now, of course, he'd be regarded by Rick Perry as some kind of socialist. Hardly. But Keynes said very simply that national income is made up of private household consumption plus business investment plus government spending plus the difference between exports and imports. Okay? That makes up income, which is roughly equivalent to GDP. Consumption plus investment plus the government plus basically your trade deficit or surplus equals your national income. Now, in a recession, in a depression, and he was writing during the Great Depression, if C and I get weak, G can make up the slack. That's all he's saying. And this equation is, nobody doubts this equation. It's a definition, and it's clearly true. So it's like one of those theories that Rick Perry would call a theory that hasn't been proven, kind of like evolution, but it's just true. Okay? There are a lot of scientific theories that aren't true. There are tons of economic theories that may or may not be true. This one is obviously true. Okay, so government can make up the slack by deficit spending in a depression, or simply by spending, period. Okay? And so fiscal policy, which is government spending, can cushion downturns. And in fact, we have that now. We have unemployment insurance that kicks in, Social Security and Medicare that continue. So government continues spending. Government taxes fall. This is why California is having a budget crisis. The tax revenues collapse. So that means people, if the taxes didn't fall, right, you're paying not a relative percentage, but an absolute amount. Of course, we'd all be worse off. So the government takes that hit. And then if the government spends and gets a deficit, the federal government can do that. States can't do that. Then it keeps money flowing through the system. So all these things, fiscal policy keeps money flowing through the system. And indeed, that's why this depression is not as bad as the Great Depression. We saved the banks quicker, and we had stabilizers built in. So already, all neoliberal theory, all analysis of Obama and so on is wrong, because it would be worse. And the Republicans say, oh no, how do you prove that? Well, there have been studies, and it clearly would have been worse. Unemployment would have been much higher, and everything would have been worse off. Okay, the second leg of Keynesian theory is monetary theory, monetary policy, and increasing the money supply. Now, we'll talk about this more when we talk about finance. I don't want to talk about this much here, but the government can also lower interest rates and make for easier lending. What did they do in 2000? They lowered the interest rate, helped trigger the housing bubble. It was so effective. What do we have now? We have interest rates near zero. Real interest rates may actually be negative. And that's the Fed. The Fed runs monetary policy. Interest rates are as low as they can possibly make them to make lending as easy as possible so that if anybody does want to do business, they can do business. Okay? Now, the stimulus today, the situation today is since 2008, is that C is very weak because households were already in debt. They were clobbered by the foreclosures, which was their biggest source of wealth, houses, and they're unemployed, a lot of them. So household income is down, and households that do have income are using it to write down their debt and make up and save a little. So they're not spending. So markets are very poor. Investment is poor, and firms aren't investing. There's something like $2 trillion of cash burning a hole in corporate pockets right now. And when the Republicans say, and the right-wingers say, that government taxation kills investment, in a depression it doesn't, because they're not investing. They don't know what to invest in, for two reasons. One is there's no consumer spending. So you don't invest in anything because nobody's going to buy your products. Secondly, there's no great new technology. The only great new technology right now is social networking. And there's tons of investment in that, but it isn't enough to get us out of the recession. It's enough to make the Bay Area economy, the inner Bay Area, is doing very well, right? You'd hardly know this was a great recession if you were in San Francisco, because everybody's working for Twitter. But the world is not being lifted up by Twitter. Twitter is not the railroad. It's not defense Cold War spending. It comes in short on a lot of measures of revolutionary technology. Okay, what Obama did was right. In fact, everybody did it. They all bailed out the banks. They all ramped up spending. China ramped it up more than anybody. Those nasty commies. And they had the least recession of anybody. In fact, they're worried about another bubble now because they pumped it up so much. Okay? So, and when federal spending from the Obama stimulus, which is another $700 billion, which, by the way, half was tax cuts, which were useless, shouldn't have been done, but the little bit he did do was propping up the economy. What happened when it ran out early this year? Everybody starts talking about, is this a double-dip recession? Not really. We're still in a recession. The private economy is doing jack, and the government spending ran out. So government, G is not a subtraction from I and C during a recession. It's an addition. And it can help stimulate investment and consumption by putting money in the pockets of consumers, putting money in the pockets of business, and giving them markets. Okay. Now, there's this mantra that Obama was repeating, only the private sector can bring recovery. This brings us back to the longer-term question of, okay, long-term growth is led by the market, it's led by capital. Governments can help, governments can force, government can stimulate. But what I'm talking about now, Keynesian stimulus policy is not a growth policy. Pumping in money and running deficits is not something you want to do ad nauseum. You get in bankruptcy. And so the Republicans are right. The fiscal conservatives are right about you can't run up infinite debt. But when you're in a recession, you need to run a deficit. Because, and the irony is that by not stimulating the economy, you take in less tax revenue because the economy does worse. Stimulating the economy, you would take in more tax revenue. And either way, if you don't stimulate, your deficit grows. If you do stimulate, your deficit probably grows less, ironically, when you're in a great recession. So the whole argument about debt, oh my God, we're in this horrible debt. Yes, we're in debt. By the way, where did we get in all this debt? Well, first of all, we ran it up, starting with Reagan and Bush, patrolling the world, but that's the next lecture. And tax cuts. So we did a couple of very, very bad things for deficit. So we were mounting up huge deficit. We also had our trade deficit, remember? So we had government deficit, trade deficit. We've been doing that for 30 years. So that didn't just happen in a Great Recession.
Question?
Yeah.
If the government would do gigantic spending, like restructuring the infrastructure and stuff like that, would that kind of invite more investment from the private sector?
Yes, it would. Yes. It would put money into the economy. That's what Keynes taught. Let me finish up here. I just wanted to say that the reason that the government is so broke, that's just true, by the way, in every country in the world, their deficits have suddenly soared. And it's not just Greece, it's everybody. And the reason is that they took on all the bank debt. They pumped all this money into the banks. And that's what, then the private debt became public debt. That's why we have so much public debt. Now, the New Deal dealt with the greatest recession in history. That's a fact, by the way. I didn't just make that up. The Great Depression was the worst depression in history. Massive fall, financial implosion. Hoover, for 4 years, didn't do very much. He was incapable of seeing his way to do that. When Roosevelt was elected, he did 3 things. He rescued the banks, he created jobs through make-work projects, and he invested in public infrastructure. And the economy recovered. Here it is going down, 29.33. Look how rapidly it recovered. That's even before World War II. And then this is World War II. Okay? So everybody says it's a World War II that got us out of the Depression. It's not. It's a New Deal. And they ran the first federal deficits in history. And Roosevelt didn't believe in deficits. He wasn't a radical, but he did understand that you had to do something in this horrendous depression. And unfortunately, that's what we found out. Now, unfortunately, I'm going over, so I'll just say a couple words at the beginning of the next lecture. Yeah, I can put it up there again.